Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Seen Beyond and Through with Monty. Today, we are going to talk about a practice and a legacy that still affects us to this very day. This practice was known as the one drop rule. And in this segment of Seen Beyond and Through, I'm going to tackle the myths, the misconceptions, and the lies about this practice called the one drop rule. Many people are citing this and are talking about this still, but they have gotten a lot of things wrong, mixed up, because they have not bothered to do any type of research on this particular topic. For a lot of people, this can be a very painful topic. It regurgitates all the bad that is about America. And let's get into the myths, the lies, the misconceptions about the one drop rule. I'm going to keep this video very simple because it could be very long if I try to divulge any deeper, but there's no reason to go any deeper if I'm just going to tackle some of the myths about it. And myth number one, it had something to do with slavery. The one drop rule has or had absolutely nothing to do with slavery. It did not involve any slaves of any kind, regardless of how mixed they were. The one drop rule came decades after slavery. In fact, 60 years after slavery. And I keep hearing people who have not done any research citing the one drop rule has been around since slavery, and nothing can be farther from the truth. The one drop rule did not come into play until 1910 in Tennessee. Then it became followed by 1924 in Virginia. So this is decades after slavery. No connection there. Second misconception is that the one drop rule is an American tradition. The one drop rule is not an American tradition. The one drop rule was not practiced the whole of the United States of America. The one drop rule was only implemented, and not by federal law, by the way. It was only implemented or practiced in 17 states. At that particular time, 1924, there was only 48 states in the Union. Alaska and Hawaii was not yet a state. So the vast majority of America, 31 states, did not practice the one drop rule. So it was not an American tradition. That is a myth right there. The other myth about the one drop rule is that it pertained to biracials. The one drop rule had absolutely nothing to do with biracial people. Nothing to do with biracial people. And I keep hearing people say, well, you want them to be black, or you want biracials to consider to be black because you're practicing the one drop rule. No, not true at all. The one drop rule was not for biracials. It was not to identify biracials. The one drop rule had nothing to do with her, nothing to do with him, nothing to do with him, nothing to do with him, nothing to do with her, nothing to do with her, nothing to do with her, nothing to do with him, nothing to do with her, nothing to do with him, nothing to do with her, nothing to do with her, nothing to do with him, nothing to do with him. It had everything to do with her, with people who look like this. This is legendary actress Freddie Washington. Miss Washington was born in the early part of the, 1903, I believe. Now, Miss Washington, when I say it had nothing to do with biracials, let me say this much right here. These biracials here cannot pass for white. They cannot pass for white at all. So the typical biracial, it had nothing to do with. Miss Freddie Washington, I'm going to say and guess that she was beyond biracial. She must have been one of these black identifying people who chose to be black, by the way, with a parent who was more like half black, half white, and probably white. Because as you can clearly see, she can actually pass for white. In fact, she's well known for the movie called Imitation of Life. And when she went to Louis B. Mayer to possibly sign with his MGM, he actually encouraged her to pass for white because he thought that she would get more work as a white woman. And it makes me think, how many other mixed actresses did you have who were some black in them and you knew that, but they passed off themselves off as being white? So keep one thing in mind. The one drop rule was applied to majority of a person who was white, who had some black in them. This is Dwight D. Eisenhower. Dwight D. Eisenhower was the 34th President of the United States of America. Do you see a white man or a black man? Here he goes right here. Do you see a white man or a black man? The one drop rule was for people like him. Here he goes in his youth. He can pass. So I guess I should say that if you were passable, which usually speaking, most black and white biracial people are not passable. Let's just tell the truth and face the fact. Most black and white biracials cannot pass for white. I mean, with the exception of like a Mariah Carey, who basically got cosmetic surgery on the nose, then later on got her hair dyed and straightened it out. Usually they cannot pass. Those who can pass, I'm going to guess, would be about 3%. That and that's going to have to be done with getting the hair straightened out, getting it dyed, maybe later on getting cosmetic surgery. Here he is as a young boy. Here he is as a young man. He can pass. The one drop rule was for people like this, not for the average biracial. And let me just tell you, it says right here, was President Eisenhower the first black president? Let's divulge into his so-called black history. This is his mother, Ida Stover. Do you see any black in her? I do. I can see some in there. There she goes right there. If you look at her hair really good, it's not completely straight. There's definitely some black in her. But I want to read to you what A.J. Rogers wrote. He was a noted historian. The picture above is of an orphan mulatto woman named Ida Stover. This photo was taken on September 23rd, 1885, on the day she married a young German immigrant named David Jacob Eisenhower. Ida Eisenhower gave birth to 6 sons, one of whom was named Dwight David Eisenhower, who later became the 34th President of the United States. Throughout his years of military service and tenure as president, no reference was ever made to Eisenhower's African roots. This was by A.J. Rogers. This was for people like him. This was not for people like Halle Berry's daughter even. Let me just say this much. Nala to me cannot pass. Now, I'm not making a claim that she should claim to be black. I'm not making any type of claim like that. I'm just stating that the one drop rule was not for anyone who had any type of discernible blackness to them. It is not for anyone where you can look at them and tell that they have African ancestry. It is not for anyone who just cannot pass, and that's not Nala. Getting back to Dwight D. Eisenhower, this is his wife, Mamie Eisenhower, white woman, blue eyes. The one drop rule would affect their children. They have definitely a drop of black or African ancestry in them. The one drop rule was for them. They're white, but they're passable. What people would have claimed that they're passing as white, even though today they would be considered white. And by the way, by today's standards, if we were to go back even 70 years ago, 30% of white people would not be considered white. The one drop rule would apply to Dwight Eisenhower's children. Today, it would most likely apply to Ronda Rousey, who had a grandmother who was mixed with black in her. Now, I'm not saying that Ronda Rousey is black. I personally do not subscribe to the one drop rule. I think it's utterly ridiculous. But it would apply to people who could pass, who had no really discernible blackness or African ancestry in them. It has nothing to do with biracial people, black and white, where you can look at them and tell that they have black in them. So, in hindsight, let me just read to you about the one drop rule, historically what it was. It is a historical colloquium term in the United States for the social classification as Negro or individuals with any African ancestry, meaning any person with one drop of Negro blood was considered black. Dwight Eisenhower's children. The principle of invisible blackness was an example of hypodescent, the automatic assignment of children of mixed union between different socioeconomic or ethnic groups to the group with the lowest status. That's hypodescent. This one drop rule was not adopted as law until the 20th century, first in Tennessee in 1910, in Virginia under the Racial Integrity Act of 1924. Following the passage of similar laws in several other states. Now keep in mind with this, it was never federal law. It was basically state laws. Despite the structure of slavery in the antebellum years, the people of mixed race could have up to 1/8 or 1/4 African ancestry, depending on the state, and be considered legally white. So the one drop rule, again, has nothing to do with slavery. More were absorbed into the majority culture based simply on appearance, association, and carrying out community responsibilities. These and community acceptance were the more important, I'll stop right there, important ideas or rules. So as you can clearly see, there's a lot of misconceptions about the one drop rule, with the biggest being the three in which I had mentioned. That it had something to do with slavery, it involved in slavery. No, it did not. That it was an American tradition. No, it was not. The vast majority of America did not adopt the one drop rule. 17 states did, 31 did not. And that it had something to do with biracial people. For the vast majority of biracial people who you can look at and tell they have African ancestry, regardless of how they self-identify, the one drop rule did not pertain to them. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that was another edition of Seeing Beyond and Through with Monty. And I will see you all beyond and through.